Hey, it's almost the end of quarter one, which means if you're an indie game developer like me, it's time to do our taxes. Now, I am not an accountant, but I've been making games for over 5 years now, and I've learned a lot about how to format the data in a way that's easy to update, easy to visualize, and easy to send to your accountant when that time does come around, whether or not you're going with a CPA or you're going to be sending it to TurboTax, something like that. So, whether or not you are another indie game developer, or maybe just a player who wants to see behind the scenes, see sort of how the sausage gets made, let's jump into it. I'll show you this sheet, and if you want the Excel format, the template, I'm going to link that in the description down below. All right, let's jump into it. Here is the Google Sheet I have, and it's basically two different sheets. The first sheet is the ledger, which is a summary of all of the different transactions, whether they are income or expenses. And then the second sheet is an overview. So this sheet, we don't manually edit at all. We're not adding information into it. Instead, it's just a summary of selected information from the ledger. So we're going to start with the ledger, and it's got basically three sections: Scott, Matthew, and BVP. Now, this was an important distinction earlier because we used to do all of our accounting out of my personal bank account. We didn't have a unique bank account for the business. Now, recently, when we set up our S Corporation, we did create a unique bank account for the Black Vein Productions company, which has vastly simplified the process. Now, whenever we can, we pay for things with the business a debit card, which means the money comes straight out of that account, and we don't need to worry about, I don't need to go into my personal account and figure out what transactions were for the business. Every now and then, though, I do make a purchase from my personal account. So for example, here, I bought something off the Unity Asset Store, which I personally had a coupon for my personal credit card, and so I will get reimbursed for that. But in the grand scheme of things, in the normal day-to-day, most of the expenses and income are coming straight from the business banking account. So that's why most of the stuff is in this BVP section. And let's go into sort of what goes into a particular entry. So for example, here we bought Weebly Pro, which is a website builder for our company website, basically. And so here's just the name. Here's how much it cost, whether it's a positive or a negative. I just always put it as a positive. And then whether it's an expense or an income, I clarify here by saying income or expense. Then here I have the category, which in this case I have as miscellaneous business. And if you like these drop downs, I think they're really cool myself. The way to do this in Google Sheets is you do data, and then you do data validation, and then you specify from what range this item can be from. So in this case, I have my own sheet here called data types, and that clarifies whether or not it can, what kind of input you could put in there. And that's what basically creates the drop-down menu. So if you have, for example, in this sheet, two entries that say income or expense, well then when I go into the ledger here and I click that drop-down, it'll show income or expense. So you choose between that. I think that's a little cool tip. I really enjoy Google Sheets, how it makes things like nice and simple, and it's got buttons, and you can do those little drop downs. Just makes it nice, sort of makes me smile when I'm working on it. So then here I have the date of the transaction. Here I have what quarter it was in, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And then finally here is a screenshot of the receipt, which in this case is just a screenshot of the statements from my bank account. So that is Q1, Q2, Q3. Have that all set up there. Now we're going to jump into the overview, which is basically a nice summary of all the information we input into the ledger. So let's get started. It's going to start with liabilities. So here we're tracking the debt that we owe people. So for example, right now, the business owes Scott $25 for something he must have purchased in the past. In this case, the business owes Matthew about $1,000, and 15 of those dollars came just this year when I bought that Unity Asset Store asset. Then here are the direct expenses, which was the majority of the expenses we saw from the previous sheet. I'll go into one of those formulas now. So for example, here you'll see that it is summarizing everything from the B column of the previous sheet. So that is the column that had the number value. And then it is saying only sum those values if certain criterion are met. So in this case, it is looking to see whether or not it is quarter 2. So it's checking whether or not the text in the F column here, which if you remember was, Q1, Q2, Q3, it is requiring that the text in that column for the row be equal to the text up here. So it's requiring it to be a quarter 2 expense. And then finally, it's requiring it to be an expense. So that's how it needs to basically say expense in the C column, which, as you remember, is this column right here where it says expense or income. So that's how the summary is made for this cell. And you just kind of drag it across and it will pull either quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, or quarter 4, depending on what column it's in. It's pretty much all automated. You just need to enter in the information on this sheet, and then you go over to the overview and it's all set up for you. So that's what that looks like. Basically, we had a lot of expenses in quarter 3, which was when we released our latest game on Steam. So we had a lot of marketing spend for that game. Then here's our ads income. So we're not serving any ads in our games right now, but in the past, that was a big portion of our income. Then we have our IAP, which is in-app purchases. This is whenever somebody buys something from one of our mobile games. So we have our Google IAP and our Apple IAP. As you can see, we made a lot of money in Apple in this quarter, but we didn't make any money from Google in this quarter. And then, it's different per quarter, but usually Apple makes us a little bit more money. And then we have the summary here for the net. Then we have our itch and Steam income, which is for our PC games. As you can see, our game was released in quarter 3, so that's where we made the most of our money. And unfortunately, it sort of didn't get any traction after that. So it is a zero, big zero for all of our revenue after the release quarter. Then we have our income. So this is basically the net income before we take the taxes. So for the whole year, we made $4,000. Then we have our net earnings. Oh, excuse me. So then we have our net earnings, which in this case was $2,000. That's the income minus expenses. We anticipate 25% taxes, so that would bring us down to a anticipated net earnings of about $1,500. Then we have our distributions, which is where we might pay our founders some money. So if we want to take a salary, for example, that's a distribution. If we want to pay Scott some money, pay Matthew some money, that would come out of this section. In this case, it's a big zero for all of us because we're not taking any money at this time. And then finally, we have just the grand summary in the bottom there. So we have our starting balance for the year was about $500. We made about $1,700, keeping in mind that we're going to lose some of that to taxes. So we haven't subtracted that yet. Then we, of course, accrued some debt, which was $15. Our total debt right now is $980, which is basically the sum of our liabilities. Our ending cash balance was about $2,000. And finally, our net standing, which is basically your liabilities subtracted from your assets, that brings us to about $1,200. So sort of the net worth of our business is about $1,200 if you want to think of it like that. That's how much cash we have on hand. So that's it. That's the summary of how we do our finances. And then I take this Excel sheet and I send it over to our accountant. I have downloaded this and I've put it into an Excel spreadsheet. So what you could do is actually, you can take this template and you could fill it in with all the information for your business if you want to use our template for your own accounting. So hopefully this was interesting for you, whether you're another indie dev or you just wanted to know a little bit about the behind the scenes process for how we do the finances in the indie game dev scene. Hope you appreciated the video and good luck out there. Hopefully you play some games or make some awesome games for us to share. Thanks.